Rising upon his couch of death, Albion beheld his sons, turning his eyes outward to self, losing the divine vision. Albion called Urizen and said, Behold these sickening spheres, whence is this voice of Ennian that soundeth in my porches? Take thou possession. Take this scepter, go forth in my might, for I am weary, and must sleep in the dark sleep of death. Thy brother Luva hath smitten me, but pity thou his youth, though thou hast not pitied my age. O Urizen, Prince of Light! Urizen rose from the bright feast like a star through the evening sky, exulting at the voice that called him from the feast of envy. First he beheld the body of man, pale, cold, the horrors of death beneath his feet shot through him as he stood in the human brain, and all its golden porches grew pale with his sickening light. No more exulting, for he saw eternal death beneath. Pale he beheld futurity, pale he beheld the abyss, where Ennian, blind and age bent, wept in the direful hunger craving, all ravening like the hungry worm, and like the silent grave. Mighty was the draught of voidness to draw existence in. Terrific Urizen strode above. In fear and pale dismay, he saw the indefinite space beneath, and his soul shrunk with horror. His feet upon the verge of non-existence, his voice went forth. Luva and Vala, trembling and shrinking, beheld the great workmaster and beheld his word. Divide ye bands, influence by influence. Build we a bower for heaven's darling in the grisly deep. Build we the mundane shell around the rock of Albion. The bands of heaven flew through the air, singing and shouting to Urizen. Some fixed the anvil, some the loom erected, some the plow and harrow formed and framed the harness of silver and ivory, the golden compasses, the quadrant and the rule and balance. They erected the furnaces. They formed the anvils of gold, beaten in mills where winter beats incessant, fixing them firm in their base. The bellows began to blow, and the lions of Urizen stood round the anvil. And the leopards covered with skins of beasts tended the roaring fires, sublime, distinct, the lineaments divine of human beauty. The tigers of wrath called the horses of instruction from their mangers. They unloosed them and put on the harness of gold and silver and ivory. In human forms distinct they stood round Urizen, Prince of Light, petrifying all the human imagination into rock and sand. Groans ran along Tiburn's brook and along the river of Oxford among the Druid temples. Albion groaned on Tiburn's brook. Albion gave his loud death groan. The Atlantic mountains trembled. Aloft the moon fled with a cry. The sun with streams of blood from Albion's loins fled all peoples and nations of the earth. Fled with the noise of slaughter, and the stars of heaven fled. Jerusalem came down in a dire ruin over all the earth. She fell cold from Lambeth's vales and groans and dewy death, the dew of anxious souls, the death sweat of the dying, in every pillared hall and arched roof of Albion's skies. The brother and the brother bathe in blood upon the severn, the maiden weeping by. The father and the mother with the maiden's father and her mother, fainting over the body, and the young man, the murderer, fleeing over the mountains. Reuben slept on Penmaenmawr, and Levi slept on Snowdon. Their eyes, their ears, nostrils, and tongues roll outward. They behold what is within, now seen without. They are raw to the hungry wind. They become nations far remote, in a little and dark land. The daughters of Albion girded around their garments of needlework, stripping Jerusalem's curtains for mild demons of the hills. Across Europe and Asia, to China and Japan, like lightnings they go forth, and return to Albion on his rocky couch. Gwendolyn, Regan, Sabrina, Goneril, Mehetabel, Cordella, Boadicea, Conwenna, Estrild, Gwynifred, Ignode, Cambrel, binding Jerusalem's children in the dungeons of Babylon. They play before the armies, before the hounds of Nimrod, while the Prince of Light on Salisbury Plain among the Druid stones, rattling the adamantine chains and brooks, heave up the ore in mountainous masses, plunged in furnaces, and they shut and sealed the furnaces at time and times. All the while blew the north his cloudy bellows, and the south and east and dismal west, and all the while the plow of iron cut the dreadful furrows. In Ulro beneath Beulah where the dead wail night and day. Luva was cast into the furnaces of affliction, and sealed, and Vala fed in cruel delight the furnaces with fire. Stern Urizen beheld, urged by necessity to keep the evil day afar, and if perchance with iron power he might avert his own despair, in woe and fear he saw Vala encircle round the furnaces where Luva was closed. In joy she heard his howlings, and forgot he was her Luva, with whom she walked in bliss, in times of innocence and youth. Hear ye the voice of Luva from the furnaces of Urizen. If I indeed am Vala's king, and ye, O sons of men, the workmanship of Luva's hands, in time of everlasting, when I called forth the earthworm from the cold and dark obscure, I nurtured her, I fed her with my rains and dews. She grew a scaled serpent, yet I fed her, though she hated me. Day after day she fed upon the mountains in Luva's sight. I brought her through the wilderness, a dry and thirsty land, and I commanded springs to rise for her in the black desert, till she became a dragon winged bright, poisonous. I opened all the floodgates of the heavens to quench her thirst, and I commanded the great deep to hide her in his hand, till she became a little weeping infant, a span long. I carried her in my bosom as a man carries a lamb. I loved her, I gave her all my soul and my delight. I hid her in soft gardens and in secret bowers of summer, weaving mazes of delight among the sunny paradise, inextricable labyrinths. She bore me sons and daughters, and they have taken her away and hid her from my sight. They have surrounded me with walls of iron and brass. O Lamb of God, clothed in Luva's garments, little knowest thou of death eternal, that we all go to eternal death, to our primeval chaos and fortuitous concourse of incoherent, discordant principles of love and hate. I suffer affliction because I love. For I was love, but hate awakens in me, and Urizen, who is faith and certainty, is changed to doubt. The hand of Urizen is upon me, because I blotted out that human delusion to deliver all the sons of God from bondage of the human form. O firstborn son of light, O Urizen, my enemy, I weep for thy stern ambition, but weep in vain. When will you return, Vala the Wanderer? These were the words of Luva, patient in afflictions, reasoning from the loins in the unreal forms of Ulro's night. And when Luva, age after age, was quite melted with woe, the fires of Vala faded like a shadow, cold and pale, an evanescent shadow. Last she fell in a heap of ashes, beneath the furnaces, a woeful heap in living death. Then were the furnaces unsealed with spades and pickaxes. Roaring let out the fluid, the molten metal ran in channels, cut by the plow of ages held in Urizen's strong hand in many a valley. For the bulls of Luva dragged the plow. With trembling horror pale, aghast, the children of man stood on the infinite earth and saw these visions in the air and waters and in earth beneath. They cried to one another, "What are we, terrors to one another? Come, O brethren, wherefore was this wide earth spread all abroad, not for wild beasts to roam?" But many stood silent and busied in their families, and many said, "We see no visions in the darksome air. Measure the course of that sulphur orb that lights the darksome day. Set stations on this breeding earth, and let us buy and sell." Others arose, and schools erected, forming instruments to measure out the course of heaven. Stern Urizen beheld in woe his brethren, his sons, in darkening woe lamenting upon the winds and clouds involved, uttering his voice in thunders, commanding all the work with power and care and severity. Then seized the lions of Urizen their work, and heated in the forge roar the bright masses. Thundering beat the hammers. Many a pyramid is formed and thrown down thundering into the deeps of nonentity. Heated red hot, they hissing rend their way down many a league, till resting, each a center finds, suspended there they stand, casting their sparkles dire abroad into the dismal deep. For measured out in ordered spaces, the sons of Urizen with compasses divide the deep. They the strong scales erect that Luva rent from the heart of the fallen man, and weigh the massy cubes, then fix them in their awful stations. And all the time in caverns shut the golden looms erected, first spun, then wove the atmospheres. There the spider and worm ply the winged shuttle, piping shrill through all the listening threads. Beneath the caverns roll the weights of lead and spindles of iron. The enormous warp and woof rage direful in the affrighted deep. While far into the vast unknown the strong-winged eagles bend their venturous flight, in human forms distinct. Through darkness deep they bear the woven draperies, on golden hooks they hang abroad the universal curtains, and spread out from sun to sun the vehicles of light. They separate the furious particles into mild currents as the water mingles with the wine. While thus the spirits of strongest wing enlighten the dark deep, the threads are spun and the cords twisted and drawn out. Then the weak begin their work, and many a net is netted, many a net spread, and many a spirit caught. Innumerable the nets, innumerable the gins and traps, and many a soothing flute is formed, and many a chorded lyre. Outspread over the immense, in cruel delight they trap the listeners, and in cruel delight bind them, condensing the strong energies into little compass. Some become seed of every plant that shall be planted, some the bulbous roots, thrown up together into barns and garners. Then rose the builders. First the architect divine his plan unfolds, the wondrous scaffold reared all round the infinite. Quadrangular the building arose, the heavens squared by a line. Trigon and cubes divide the elements in finite bonds. Multitudes without number work incessant. The hewn stone is placed in beds of mortar mingled with the ashes of Vala. Severe the labor. Female slaves the mortar trod, oppressed. 12 halls after the names of his 12 sons compose the wondrous building, and 3 central domes after the names of his 3 daughters were encompassed by the 12 bright halls, every hall surrounded by bright paradises of delight in which were towns and cities, nations, seas, mountains, and rivers. Each dome opened toward 4 halls, and the 3 domes encompassed the golden hall of Urizen, whose western side glowed bright with ever-straying fires beaming from his awful limbs. His shadowy feminine semblance here reposed on a white couch, or hovered o'er his starry head, and when he smiled she brightened like a white cloud in harvest. But when Urizen frowned she wept in mists over his carved throne, and when he turned his back upon his golden hall and sought the labyrinthine porches of his wide heaven, trembling, cold, in paling fears she sat, a shadow of despair. Therefore toward the west Urizen formed a recess in the wall for fires to glow upon the pale female limbs in his absence, and her daughters oft upon a golden altar burnt perfumes with art celestial formed, 4 square sculptured and sweetly engraved to please their shadowy mother. Ascending into her misty garments the blue smoke rolled to revive her cold limbs in the absence of her lord. Also her sons with lives of victims sacrificed upon an altar of brass. On the east side revived her soul with lives of beasts and birds, slain on the altar up ascending into her cloudy bosom. of terrible workmanship, the altar, labor of 10,000 slaves, 1,000 men of wondrous power spent their lives in its formation. It stood on 12 steps named after the names of her 12 sons, and was erected at the chief entrance of Urizen's hall. When Urizen returned from his immense labors and travels, descending, she reposed beside him, folding him around in her bright skirts. Astonished and confounded, he beheld her shadowy form, now separate. He shuddered and was silent till her caresses and her tears revived him to life and joy. 2 wills they had, 2 intellects, and not as in times of old. This Urizen perceived and silent brooded in darkening clouds. To him his labor was but sorrow, and his kingdom was repentance. He drave the male spirits all away from Ahania, and she drave all the females from him away. Lost joyed, and Enitharmon laughed, saying, "Let us go down and see this labor and sorrow." They went down to see the woes of Vala and the woes of Luva, to draw in their delights. And Vala like a shadow oft appeared to Urizen. The king of light beheld her mourning among the brick kilns, compelled to labor night and day among the fires. Her lamenting voice is heard when silent night returns and the laborers take their rest. O Lord, wilt thou not look upon our sore afflictions, among the flames incessant laboring? Our hard masters laugh at all our sorrow. We are made to turn the wheel for water, to carry the heavy basket on our scorched shoulders, to sift the sand and ashes, and to mix the clay with tears and repentance. I see not Luva as of old. I only see his feet like pillars of fire traveling through darkness and nonentity. The times are now returned upon us. We have given ourselves to scorn, and now are scorned by the slaves of our enemies. Our beauty is covered o'er with the clay and ashes, and our backs furrowed with whips, and our flesh bruised with the heavy basket. Forgive us, O thou piteous one, whom we have offended. Forgive the weak remaining shadow of Vala that returns in sorrow to thee. As she lamented day and night, compelled to labor and sorrow, Luva in vain her lamentations heard. In vain his love brought him in various forms before her. Still she knew him not. Still she despised him, calling on his name and knowing him not. Still hating, still professing love, still laboring in the smoke. And Los and Enitharmon joyed. They drank in tenfold joy from all the sorrow of Luva and the labor of Urizen. And Enitharmon joyed, plotting to rend the secret cloud to plant divisions in the soul of Urizen and Ahania. But infinitely beautiful the wondrous work arose in sorrow and care, a golden world whose porches round the heavens and pillared halls and rooms received the eternal wandering stars, a wondrous golden building. Many a window, many a door, and many a division led in and out into the vast unknown, cubed in window, square, immovable. Within its walls and ceilings the heavens were closed, and spirits mourned their bondage night and day, and the divine vision appeared in Luva's robes of blood. This was the mundane shell, builded by Urizen's strong power. Sorrowing went the planters forth to plant, the sowers to sow. They dug the channels for the rivers. They poured abroad the seas and lakes. They reared the mountains and rocks and hills and broad pavilions, on pillared roofs and porches and high towers in beauteous order. Thence arose soft clouds and exhalations, wandering even to the sunny cubes of light and heat. For many a window ornamented with sweet ornaments looked out into the world of Tharmas, where in ceaseless torrents his billows roll, where monsters wander in the foamy paths. On clouds the sons of Urizen beheld heaven walled round. They weighed and ordered all, and Urizen comforted saw the wondrous work flow forth like visible out of the invisible. For the divine Lamb, even Jesus, who is the divine vision, permitted all. lest man should fall into eternal death. For when Luva sunk down, himself put on the robes of blood, lest the state called Luva should cease. The divine vision walked in robes of blood, till he who slept should awake. Thus were the stars of heaven created like a golden chain, to bind the body of man to heaven from falling into the abyss. Each took his station, and his course began with sorrow and care. In sevens and tens and fifties, hundreds, thousands, numbered all according to their various powers, subordinate to Urizen and to his sons and their degrees and to his beauteous daughters. Traveling in silent majesty along their ordered ways and right-line paths outmeasured by proportions of number, weight, and measure, mathematic motion, wondrous, along the deep and fiery pyramid or cube or unornamented pillar of fire far shining, traveling along even to its destined end, then falling down a terrible space, recovering in winter dire its wasted strength, it back returns upon another course, till fired with ardor fresh recruited in its humble season, it rises up on high all summer, till its wearied course turns into autumn, such the period of many worlds. Others triangular, right-angled course maintain, others obtuse, acute, scaling, in simple paths, but others move in intricate ways by quadrate, trapeziums, rhomboids, parallelograms, triple and quadruple, polygonic, in their amazing, hard, subdued course in the vast deep. And Los and Enitharmon were drawn down by their desires, descending sweet upon the wind among soft harps and voices, to plant divisions in the soul of Urizen and Ahania, to conduct the voice of Enion to Ahania's midnight pillow. Urizen saw and envied, and his imagination was filled. Repining, he contemplated the past in his bright sphere, terrified with his heart and spirit at the visions of futurity that his dread fancy formed before him in the unformed void. For Los and Enitharmon walked forth on the dewy earth, contracting or expanding their all-flexible senses, at will to murmur in the flowers small as the honeybee, at will to stretch across the heavens and step from star to star, or standing on the earth erect, or on the stormy waves, driving the storms before them, or delighting in sunny beams, while round their heads the elemental gods kept harmony. And Los said, Lo, the lily pale and rose reddening fierce, reproach thee, and the beamy garden sicken at thy beauty. I grabbed thy vest in my strong hand, in vain, like water springs in the bright sands of Los, evading my embrace. Then I alone wander in among the virgins of the summer. Look, they cry, the poor forsaken Los, mocked by the worm, the shelly snail, the emmet, and the beetle. Hark, they laugh and mock at Los. Enitharmon answered, Secure now from the smitings of thy power, demon of fury, if the god enrapture me in folds and clouds of sweet obscurity, my beauteous form dissolving, howl thou over the body of death, 'tis thine. But if among the virgins of summer I have seen thee sleep, and turn thy cheek delighted upon the rose or lily pale, or on a bank where sleep the beamy daughters of the light, starting they rise, they flee from thy fierce love. For though I am dissolved in the bright God, my spirit still pursues thy false love over rocks and valleys. Los answered, Therefore fade I, dissolved in rapturous trance. Thou canst repose on clouds of secrecy, while o'er my limbs cold dews and hoary frost creeps, though I lie on banks of summer among the beauties of the world, cold and repining. Los still dies for Enitharmon, nor a spirit springs from my dead course, then I am dead, till thou revivest me with thy sweet song, now taking on Ahania's form, and now the form of Enion. I know thee not as once I knew thee in those blessed fields where memory wishes to repose upon the flocks of Tharmas. Enitharmon answered, Wherefore didst thou throw thine arms around Ahania's image? I deceived thee, and will still deceive. Urizen saw thy sin, and hid his beams in darkening clouds. I still keep watch, although I tremble and wither across the heavens in strong vibrations of fierce jealousy, for thou art mine, created for my will, my slave, though strong, though I am weak. Farewell. The god calls me away. I depart in my sweet bliss. She fled, vanishing on the wind, and left a dead, cold corse in Los's arms. Howlings began over the body of death. Los spoke, "Thy God in vain shall call thee, if by my strong power I can infuse my dear revenge into his glowing breast. Then jealousy shall shadow all his mountains, and Ahania curse thee, thou plague of woeful loss, and seek revenge on thee." So saying, in deep sobs he languished, till dead he also fell. Night passed, and then Atharman, ere the dawn returned in bliss, she sang over Los, reviving him to life. His groans were terrible, but thus she sang, "I seize the sphery harp, I strike the strings. At the first sound the golden sun arises from the deep and shakes his awful hair. The echo wakes the moon to unbind her silver locks. The golden sun bears on my song, and 9 bright spheres of harmony rise round the fiery king. The joy of woman is the death of her most beloved, who dies of love of her. In torments of fierce jealousy and pangs of adoration, the lover's night bears on my song, and the 9 spheres rejoice beneath my powerful control. They sing unceasing to the notes of my immortal hand. The solemn, silent moon reverberates the living harmony upon my limbs. The birds and beasts rejoice and play, and everyone seeks for his mate to prove his inmost joy. Furious and terrible, they sport and rend the nether deeps. The deep lifts off his rugged head, then lost in infinite humming wings, vanishes with a cry. The fading cry is ever dying. The living voice is ever living in its inmost joy. Arise, you little glancing wings, and sing your infant joy. Arise and drink your bliss, for everything that lives is holy, for the source of life descends to be a weeping babe, for the earthworm renews the moisture of the sandy plain. Now my left hand I stretch to earth beneath, and strike the terrible string. I wake sweet joy in dens of sorrow, and I plant a smile in forests of affliction, and wake the bubbling springs of life in regions of dark death. Oh, I am weary. Lay thine hand upon me, or I faint. I faint beneath these beams of thine, for thou hast touched my 5 senses, and they answered thee. Now I am nothing, and I sink on the bed of silence. Sleep till thou awakest me. Thus sang the lovely one in rapturous, delusive trance. Lost her, reviving, he seized her in his arms, delusive hopes kindling. She led him into shadows, and thence fled outstretched upon the immense, like a bright rainbow, weeping and smiling and fading. Thus lived Lost, striving Ennian far into the deathful infinite, that he may also draw Ahania's spirit into her vortex. A happy blindness, Ennian sees not the terrors of the uncertain. Thus Ennian wails from the dark deep, the golden heavens tremble. Am I made to sow the thistle for wheat, the nettle for a nourishing dainty? I have planted a false oath in the earth. It has brought forth a poison tree. I have chosen the serpent for a counselor, and the dog for a schoolmaster to my children. I have blotted out from light and living the dove and nightingale. I have caused the earthworm to beg from door to door. I have taught the thief a secret path into the house of the just. I have taught pale artifice to spread his nets upon the morning. My heavens are brass, my earth is iron, my moon a clod of clay, my sun a pestilence burning at noon, and a vapor of death and night. What is the price of experience? Do men buy it for a song, or wisdom for a dance in the street? No, it is bought with the price of all that a man hath, his house, his wife, his children. Wisdom is sold in the desolate market where none come to buy, and in the withered field where the farmer plows for bread in vain. It is an easy thing to triumph in the summer's sun, and in the vintage, and to sing on the wagon loaded with corn. It is an easy thing to talk of patience to the afflicted, to speak the laws of prudence to the houseless wanderer, to listen to the hungry raven's cry in wintry season when the red blood is filled with wine and with the marrow of lambs. It is an easy thing to laugh at wrathful elements, to hear the dog howl at the wintry door, the ox in the slaughterhouse moan, to see a God on every wind and a blessing on every blast, to hear sounds of love in the thunderstorm that destroys our enemy's house, to rejoice in the blight that covers his field, in the sickness that cuts off his children, while our olive and vines sing and laugh around our door, and our children ring flutes and flowers. Then the groan and the dollar are quite forgotten, and the slave grinding at the mill, and the captive in chains, and the poor in the prison, and the soldier in the field when the shattered bone hath laid him groaning among the happier dead. It is an easy thing to rejoice in the tents of prosperity. Thus could I sing, and thus rejoice, but it is not so with me. Ahania heard the lamentation, and a swift vibration spread through her golden frame. She rose up ere the dawn of day, when Urizen slept on his couch, drawn through unbounded space onto the margin of nonentity. The bright female came. There she beheld the spectrous form of Ennion in the void. Never from that moment could she rest upon her pillow. End of the second night.